We have many times come across this words, that is English language teaching. But do we really know its meaning? No need to worry, here I am to explain it. So, English language teaching is the practice and theory of learning and teaching English for the benefit of people whose first language is not English. In the sense, teaching of English is for the non-native English speakers who are having their mother tongue in a different language and still they want to learn English. And their purpose to learn English may vary accordingly. Like, some wants to learn English for job purpose, others want to learn it for their status in the society, as English is unfairly labeled as language of the civilized. Others may learn English for trade and commerce purpose, and etc. Nevertheless, what is the history behind English language teaching that had its way through the current time, and how it is shaped now is the main topic of our discussion. So, let's see the brief history of English language teaching, or the ELT. For the convenience, let's divide the history of English language teaching into three phases. First phase starts somewhere in the early 15th century, lasting up to later 18th century. Second phase is the whole 19th century. And the last, third phase is also known as modern phase, which begins in early 20th century to present. Now, let's proceed to see them in more detailed manner. In the first phase, there are 5 centuries as shown. In the 14th century, there is this notion that French paved the way for English language. Means, after the Norman conquest of England in 1066, the usage of French language that was dominant in the Europe reduced, and many French words gained its entry into English language. It is estimated that about 2/3 of English vocabulary is of French origin. And keeping in mind its difficulty level, many educational institutions started teaching English language, and these institutions had a power-packed teaching of modern, classical and English language. With the coming of 15th century, 3 important incidents took place. First, the then King of England, that is King Henry IV, made English their main language in England. Later, his son, King Henry V, declared English as official language. And with the end of the century, law books were available in English. Apart from this, if we look at the school level, grammar in English was mostly taught in Latin, while day-to-day communication of people remained in English. The reason for this was, English and grammar books were not yet available. This is because, although printing press was invented in 1476, its initial use was reserved for the printing of Bible and other religious texts. And this kind of English and grammar books were not taken into consideration for printing till 17th century. For this reason, teachers taught in the form of dialogue. And these dialogues were pertaining to everyday life, or they also taught in the form of question, in which the students were required to answer the asked question by teacher. The socio-political period of 16th century showed Roman Catholic Church being replaced by Church of England under its supreme head King Henry VIII. This Church of England was led by Protestants, who questioned the authority of court, and people became more liberal and started exploring and migrating. In this scenario, many pro-reformists from parts of Spain, Italy and France started coming and settling in England. Now at this point, to make a healthy relationship between non-natives and natives, the native teachers and educationalists started to develop ELT course materials for the non-native learners. The plus point for this was, many among the non-natives were teachers who had better knowledge of English. They too began to teach English all over Europe and got chance to contribute to the process of English language teaching. Therefore, they are also known as first non-native English teachers in England. Result of this led many migrant communities to improve their status in different fields. For example, one migrant called Jacques Ballet went on to become a scholar, eventually publishing English language textbook named The English Schoolmaster in 1596 and other familiar dialogue. And as its name suggests, it was in the form of dialogue. This publication in turn encouraged many other scholars and writers to make their contribution in English books. One among them was Holiband's The French Schoolmaster, published in 1972. It was this book that formed the basis for ELT for many coming decades. By 17th century, many non-natives who earlier came from Spain, Italy and France went back and settled in their original land permanently. However, this did not stop English language lovers to learn and teach Latin and Greek in schools of England. In the same age, another point worth noting is two scholars named John Webb and J.A. Comines came up with technique of teaching ELT. John Webb inclined towards prominence for picture in ELT, while J.A. Comines inclined towards importance of grammar in language teaching. In the same age, Elizabethan drama, especially of William Shakespeare's play, owned much popularity that led many Europeans and non-Europeans towards a passion and attraction for learning of English. After this, formation of East India Company in 1600 made England's merchant to migrate to various African and South Asian countries, who later turned on to be colonizers and formed British colonies after achieving prospects in these countries. They also helped to introduce English to other undiscovered non-European areas. 18th century opened the door of learning in Russia, and credit of this may be given to scholars like Michael Premsky, who translated the practical English grammar in Russian. Therefore, with this, we can estimate English reaching all corners of the world from far east to far west. And scholars like Michael played an instrumental role in this process of making English available to commoners. His work too encouraged many other writers to be a part of such activities. In 1797, another great scholar, John Miller, published first non-European ELT book called The Tutor of a New English and Bengali Work from Indian state of Bengal. While back in the Europe, the secondary school began to teach English as additional language, called Teaching English as Foreign Language. By this, it's confirmed that English was main and special subject. However, teaching of English still depended on the teaching methods in Latin and Greek. It made English teaching teachers to think of developing new techniques. Therefore, this marks the arrival of grammar teaching method in 1980s in Germany, followed by Berlitz's method or the direct method and more on. If one wishes to know these methods, please do visit the video whose link is flashing here at the top right corner. Anyways, the purpose of this method was to identify different ELT needs, cite its implication in different countries, and make necessary reforms for its use. And this scientific and psychological study of language paved way for many theoretical foundations of the language methodology. Now the next phase covers whole 19th century. So, 19th century was the century when and where rapid development in English language teaching took place, like English-speaking population increased to billions. As in the 17th century we saw, many South Asian countries received an exposure to English language through East India Company. Now, it was the time when the colonizers or the rulers of England wanted their colonized citizens to learn English other than their mother tongue. For this, the British government allowed Christian missionaries to provide education in English to natives. And teaching of English language in the British colonies was called as teaching English as a second language. Also, they taught various kinds of knowledge of Western culture and literature in addition to English. But why would the natives accept language of people coming from a distant geographical location? Reason to this was Britishers were clever enough to announce that only persons well versed in English would get employment in government jobs. Some of the countries that witnessed such practices were Sri Lanka, India, Burma, and others. Now the last phase, that is from 20th century to present. Again for convenience, let's divide it into 3 phases. First, from 1900 to 1945. Next, after World War II, that is from 1945 to 1970. And the third, from 1970 to present. First, let's see the period between 1900 to 1945. Here, 2 things worth noting are ELT as a term gained wide acceptance and many new learnings, theories, approaches and methods of teaching began to emerge in English language teaching. Then, the second phase. During this phase, many factual happenings took place. Like, first, the abbreviation means short form of ELT came into existence. Means English language teaching that was called fully reduced to just ELT. And this happened after the publication of British Council's journal named English Language Teaching in 1946. The period also witnessed the start of time training programs for English language teachers to make ELT more effective and significant. Next, marked the beginning of applied linguistics, where practical application of English language was given to the English learners. Then, Hornsby's writing on situational approach brought ELT's focus on classroom. Again, this we have dealt in detail in the previous video. Also, English Language Teaching Institution, along with British Broadcasting Corporation, that is BBC, provided ELT book in different cities in Europe. The period also marked the establishment of ARLs, or Association of Recognized English Language Schools in 1960s. It formed a source of ELT material and it contributed to make ELT a full-time profession. Along with the other institution, it also helped to create many seminars, workshops and conferences which helped to foster English foreign language and English as second language learning for teachers and learners so that they could fearlessly share their views, ideas and knowledge and their experience. In the same year, audiolingual methods were introduced, which further turned into the use of tape recorders and then further into television as a source for effective teaching of English. And if we look at the present, internet or e-learning can be added to this list. Then, it was during this time the non-native English speakers started learning English for higher education. In 1970s, English for Immigrants was renamed to Teaching of English as a Second Language. Plus, this led to the birth of English for Special Purpose. In the last or the recent phase, communication has greatly influenced English language teaching. Then, systematic preparation and designing of curriculum, textbook and evolution of this process is carried out. We just saw that English for Special Purpose was started in 1970s and in the more recent time, English for Special Purpose is becoming huge and is forming various branches of it like English for Academic Purpose, English for Occupational Purpose, English for Science and Technology, etc. By this we can say, English language teaching as an entity is rapidly growing in its scope for different specific needs and requirement of learners within different areas. With this, growth of textbooks and course materials naturally went on increasing. For example, English in Physical Science by Ellen and Widdowson in 1974. This learnings and teaching material helped ELT to be more flexible in itself and succeeded in focusing on other skills of language rather than grammar. Another important point is British Council has developed a proficiency test in English language called ELT Services or ELTS, which was later called as IELTS, that is IELTS. So if you wish to go to foreign and study, then this IELTS certificate really boosts your prospects for education. Or apart from this, even if you wish to test yourself for the English knowledge, you may also try the IELTS exam. However, there are counterparts to many developments that took place in English language teaching. Some were of the opinion that English language teaching should stick to the basics. For example, Earl Stivik was of such opinion. He published a book named Memory, Meaning and Method in 1976, in which he revisits the earlier strategies of English language teaching. Following this, he said, earlier methods were humanistic methods, and this term he used in his book Humanism in Language Teaching. Nevertheless, many other theorists came up with their English language teaching theories. Some of them worth noting are Stephen Krashen, N.S. Prabhu, Curran, and Asher, etc. Now, if we come to the recent time, we may observe coming of various trends in English language teaching, like blended learning, where teacher combines digital media with traditional form of teaching. For example, YouTube. The way in which you are studying now is the blended way of learning. Then comes mobile learning. That needs no explanation, I think. Next is the gamification. In this, games are used in the form of learning vocabulary for young learners. For example, Duolingo. Then, embodied learning that focuses on learning involving mind and body. Then is the inquiry-based learning. Here, the students are made to answer the questions asked by teacher. This is then followed by English as a lingua franca and multiple literacies and translanguaging. This means for the communication of people of different language, different communities or cross-border communication to happen, people speak in English as a medium of communication. Then, supporting learners of specific needs, just as we saw in the case of English for special purpose. Then, creating and sharing content. These are some program or app which allow learners to create their own content and share it. For example, quizzes. The last one is learning and teaching management performances. This gives learners an online way to find handouts, then continue classroom discussion and submit homework, as in case of NPTEL courses. Having said this, ends today's video. I hope you learned a bit, and I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks for listening.